Hello there, kia ora. Welcome to this week's campaign Korero. A little bit later in the episode, we're going to catch up with Shannon Halbert, the Labour Party spokesperson for tertiary education, to talk about their new apprenticeship boost, exactly how that's going to work, how much it's going to cost, and how it's going to help with the labour force. But before then, let's take a quick look at some of the campaign headlines that have been shaping the campaign over the last week. The Green Party launched a large-scale water quality policy built around three pillars of water use, providing drinkable water, swimmable public spaces, and marine protection from commercial overfishing and bottom trawling, while supporting kaitiakitanga Māori and marine management and iwi and hapu restoration initiatives. Co-leader Marama Davidson said of the policy, "Clean, healthy water is a human right and has been a way of life in Aotearoa for many generations." Data released this week from the Electoral Commission continues the long-held trend of the majority of Māori voters choosing to be on the Māori roll, while longer-term trends show the roll to be increasingly the first choice for rangatahi Māori over the general roll. Between March and June this year, the Commission reports 4,731 voters had moved to the roll, with 3,381 new enrolments, outstripping the general roll growth for the same period. The Human Rights Commissioner, Dr. Melissa Darby, this week issued a call for politicians to use their words responsibly and avoid hateful speech as part of their election campaign, as a response to comments made by self-appointed Bishop Brian Tamaki. Darby, who was a founding member of the Free Speech Union because she wanted to bring over white supremacist speakers Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern in 2022, the opposition of which led to the founding of the right-wing AstroTurf lobby group responsible for bringing over speakers linked with Jeffrey Epstein, supported by neo-Nazis and calling for people to hate trans people for existing, said, "My job is to remind people that at the end of this rhetoric are real people who daily feel the impacts of hateful speech." New Zealand First this week announced right-wing commentator for the platform Michael Laws as a candidate in the Waitangi seat for the 2026 general election. Laws was forced to resign from Parliament in 1996 after it was revealed he had given a contract to his partner who was using a fake name at the time to receive the contract. He received multiple BSA complaints over comments around Tonga's late King Tupou IV. He's fought against the corrected pronunciation of Whanganui, claimed Africa represents the worst of humanity, and supported the 1981 Springbok tour. Laws joins other disgraced former political figures Stuart Nash, Alfred Naro, Elliot Ikeley and Shane Jones in the party. Labour's Priyanka Radhakrishnan cited the principle "nothing for us without us" as she accepted a petition recently from Victoria Coleman calling for the end of the controversial Disability Support Services Bill, which is designed to stop parents who are full-time carers of people with disabilities from being able to access government compensation for the role. Disability Minister Louise Upston claimed that despite the bill explicitly stating the change would occur, that nothing would change if the bill went through. Members of the disabled community, however, have low levels of trust in the government after the March 18, 2024 shock announcement of the end of whaikaha funding for many of those in need. The party of disgraced former political figures and checking what's in your pants before you pee has promised, if elected, to stop non-citizens from voting. Peters has proposed that permanent residents have their right to vote removed permanently. The length of time before a resident can become a citizen varies depending on their immigration pathway, and there is a cost involved which can be prohibitive for many towards getting that final citizenship. Currently, this would disproportionately impact people from Australia, the United Kingdom, America, the Philippines, China, and India. The most of these large migrant arrival numbers come from these countries, but because some of them are traditionally white countries, Peter somehow forgot to mention them in his speeches. ACT has announced its final candidates for the upcoming election. While every ACT candidate is happy to stand with a party that willingly hid a pedophile so they wouldn't lose the 2023 general election while whipping up racist foment with the Treaty Principles Bill, and happily spending exorbitant amounts of money on their pet projects while demanding the rest of government be cut to the bone, this tranche also includes Amanda Roberts, who will be running in Glendine. Roberts ran with the Voices for Freedom and conspiracy-aligned West Wards group at the 2025 local body election, whose members supported the man who tried to bring down the North Island power grid, and groups demanding the country leave the WHO because of a future pandemic cooperation treaty. Parliament ended its most recent term with a final push of urgency to pass 10 bills into laws last week, the final chance to do so before the regulatory period of the election changes processes. Amongst the bills were the health and safety laws that government ministers have admitted that they know will result in more workplace deaths, but they chose to vote for them anyway. silencing regulatory bodies whose industry-setting rules include an understanding of tikanga Māori that upset hard-right voters, giving the Electoral Commission more time to do their job of counting votes after claiming the time that they had already meant having to stop same-day enrolment to this election, and anti-boy racing legislation that allows the government to crush cars again that failed the last time it was in place. Right, and that's our summary all done and dusted. Let's go and catch up with Shannon and learn a little bit more about Labour's apprenticeship boost. Shannon, welcome. Thank you for joining me. I've got questions around the apprenticeship boost that was announced a couple of weeks ago. Do you want to give me a run through on it? Because I know that the program was set up initially under COVID, and then this government was like, no, that's giving away too much. And they pulled it back a little bit to, fund their tobacco kickbacks and stuff like that. What is it that Labour would like to see happen going forward with the apprenticeship boost?
Yeah, this policy announcement will expand the existing apprenticeship boost program from 1 year to 2 years. The reason why that's important is it continues the wage subsidy support that goes to employers. We want more employers to create work opportunities for young people. That's one of the main goals in this particular policy. And we know that it's worked in the past. We saw a high peak in the number of young people participating in apprenticeships. At its peak in 2023, we saw the National Party make cuts to that program, and as a result, we have 10,000 less apprentices on the Apprenticeship Boost program, at this point in time. But we also want to make it better. And so we've been thinking about the other industries that are important. The National Party cuts meant that we saw less women going into apprenticeships. And so we've re-included areas like hair and beauty, sport and rec, sales and marketing, industries where young women tend to put up their hand and go and participate in apprenticeships. So we want that to continue. But also we've added in water engineering and road construction, knowing how important to keep up growing our workforce in those particular areas that can range from, the people doing the lollipop on the roads, but it leads to really long-term sustainable employment, and that's really important.
One of the numbers I saw come out around this research of what you guys are adding and how it's going to help people, something like 27,000 students are expected to be able to take part in this and to see benefits from this. Another number I heard was 20,000 tradies lost to Australia because of the government shutting construction down, shutting down a lot of these businesses and forcing a lot of these closures. Is this an offset to that? Is this a way of keeping people in the country?
Well, we know when we stop public investment in core infrastructure, things like hospitals, classrooms, housing, that means that there's less job opportunities for the average Kiwi in these particular workforce areas, but particularly it doesn't support a pipeline of training up young people for long-term careers in areas like construction. So the first part is, government has to invest in New Zealand's infrastructure. We've agreed on sort of a light 30-year plan between the two parties now, and so now we need to think about the workforce and how we gear that up moving forward. But the other part, of course, is that we've got to ensure that the right support mechanisms are in place. And there's two parts for young people. We want them to get into employment, but we also want them to complete their qualification in whatever field that they might be studying in, whether that's a hairdresser, whether that's a construction worker, whether that's a health and support worker, so on and so forth. We want to make sure that they complete their qualification. And that's where we saw a bit of drop-off last time when we saw the peak number of apprentices coming through. So what we've done about that is we've created a wraparound support program that will be led out by the industry skills boards and providers. That will make sure that an apprentice, when they're working, has mental health support if they need it, that they've got a good relationship with their employer, that their training advisor is connecting and coordinating with them more frequently. But a lot of the pastoral care requirements are taken care of as well. One of the barriers that we know that apprentices face when they start the job is the affordability piece. And, when we think about how much has changed in the last 3 years with the cost of living, is it's expensive to get a basic tool belt to go and work on a construction site, we're looking at sort of, more than $1,000. If you're training to be a hairdresser, you've got to get your clipper kit, your scissors, your products and all those sorts of things. And then, you think of other areas like uniforms, steel cap boots, raincoats if you're working outside. That costs, and there's a lot of upfront costs with that. And so this policy offers up to $1,000 that will be administered by Work and Income to reimburse young people for the costs that their employer needs them to have. That support is important. It eliminates that barrier and enables them to get on with the job, get into work, and really focus on doing the mahi that they need to.
How does this then support those employers that might be looking at bringing on an apprentice?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's employers that will create the job opportunities that we want to see. And so the Apprenticeship Boost program offers up $500 a month, and we've expanded that from 1 year to 2 years. The employer still pays the rest of the wages. That's really, really important. But it means that that young person, as an apprentice, is earning a full-time wage on the training allowance at a very minimum. And if they're doing really well, we'll see that quickly go up to minimum wage. And if they do really, really well, in a very short time, the employer will raise that wage in recognition of their great work.
One of the things I've found in the research for this as well is if an employer trains up an employee the way that they want to do things and the way that they work, they tend to keep them on for longer as well after all the training's done. They've got all their qualifications. Was that something that we saw as an outcome from the first time this program was tried?
Last time the program at its peak, one of the problems that we had actually, and it's a good problem to have, is that you had employers poaching apprentices from other organisations, because if you're good, then you're able to move around between organisations. The downfall of that is that sometimes the apprentice dropped their apprenticeship and their qualification along the way and just went on into work. So that's a really good outcome for some, but it is important, the consistency and ensuring that apprentices complete their qualification through their providers, and that's what we want them to achieve, and that's why we're supporting them to do so.
In terms of the cost, because this is something that obviously has a cost attached to it, how has the values that you're putting forward been worked out, and how much is it being, how is it being paid for?
Yeah, so this will be paid out of future operating allowances with MSD. So the money is already in the system. That also means that we'll start off on what is quite a low base from this government as a result. So 9,000, we'll grow that about 15% year on year. And at the end of the 3-year cycle, 2030, that will have about 27,000 apprentices that the Apprenticeship Boost scheme will be supporting. That means young people are in full-time employment, they're completing their qualification, and that's a great thing for Aotearoa.
Is there a group of students out there now then who you think should be looking at this as an option? Sort of 12 months down the track going, I want to go into an apprenticeship. What do you think they should be aware of, and what would be your message to them if they're considering this as an option?
There's a fundamental difference between us and the National Party. The National Party thinks that young people don't want to work. And under Labour, we believe that young people do want a job, and they certainly want an opportunity to get ahead. And, our leadership role in a future government is about ensuring that those job opportunities are created. And that's exactly what this scheme is about, supporting employers to open up those gigs, to enable young people to get working in relevant industries. Employers really enjoy giving back to their communities. They enjoy training young people. And so this is a small way that we can incentivize that, recognize that contribution from our employers, and make sure that young people have sustainable employment moving forward.
How do you get that message to young people? Because there's always a bit of a disconnect between getting younger people out there to vote. Obviously, we have an election coming up, and getting young people out to vote is really important. Is there a way that you guys have approached how to get this message out to them?
Yeah, we're going to be working really hard on the campaign trail, talking to key influencers of young people, talking to communities. But we're not too far separated when we think about it. And I always use an example of a hairdresser in Whakatane who supports the community in any way that through the apprenticeship boost scheme, they've heard from the local high school that Mere is really keen to pursue a career in hairdressing, and so why not open up that opportunity? I believe that those relationships are already there. Our job is to communicate that message out, get the employer and get the young person really activated and connected together so that they can access the apprenticeship boost scheme. The demand is there.
Cool. And final question for you, where can people learn more about this? Is there a website they can head to?
Yeah, we've put up a whole lot of information on our Labour Party website, labour.org.nz. We've outlined the policy, the details of it, the costings for those that are interested. But what it comes back to, Paul, is when we think of that number that I give you, 100,000 young people not engaged in education, employment or training, 20,000 construction workers that have headed over to Australia, and of course, 17,000 less apprentices since National took over. Those statistics are appalling, no matter which way that we look at it. And so the Apprenticeship Boost scheme is our first policy out that is going to incentivize employment opportunities, get young people into work, and fulfilling, a contribution to society that I believe young people want to do.
Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. While you're here, why not hit that like button or share the video or even subscribe to the channel. You could even become a paid YouTube member so you can see things released in advance, you get access to some exclusive content, and like all these awesome people, you get to have your name at the end of the credits as well.